Kevin, I'm sure you see, every day you're getting cars that are wrecked.
Yep.
They're coming in. People are either the victim, if you will. They've been clobbered, or they're the, ooh, that was my fault.
Yep.
And they're not as happy. But what do we do?
Well, the first thing I recommend, I run into it all the time, is make sure you have adequate coverage. I have stories that come in. I like your line that you were talking about this morning, Matt.
There's two people: those who have had an accident, and those that are going to have an accident.
Exactly. I'm going to make some brochures with that or something, because that's just genius. But what happens is people have this idea that it's never going to happen to me, and their coverage doesn't support their type of vehicle. They just don't have coverage, and it happens a lot to where I have liability only, and I can't get my car fixed. So that's the first thing. Don't ever think it's not going to happen to you. Unfortunately, it's happened to me way too many times.
Well, and you were telling me a story of a friend who had a late model truck, like a 2009 or 10. It was paid off, and whether he forgot and said, "Oh, I can save $1,000 a year and not have full coverage because it's never going to happen to me," or maybe the agent had the bright idea, gets in a wreck, it's his fault.
The truck totals out, and
sorry, dude,
and you're going to have to go car shopping.
Yeah. So be prepared. I guess the first thing is be prepared and have good coverage, so that when, and you notice I say when you have an accident, that you can get your car fixed. But having some things in the car, you want to have. We all have a lot of people have smartphones and phones that can take pictures. If you have one of those, great. Maybe an old disposable, not even old. You get the Kodak camera for $10 and. Throw it in the glove box. Of course, you got to have your registration and insurance.
Yeah, you have a kit together already set up to where you have everything all in one place, a pen or a pencil, some paper, the registration. Make sure you have your license and your insurance, your valid insurance card. A lot of people, it lapsed, and then they're going to have to go down to court. Obviously, they're going to have to prove that they were insured at that time. It just takes more time out of their life to facilitate all of that.
Well, but let's talk about, so there's the paperwork side, being prepared. Yep. Let's call that the administrative part. You need to administratively make sure that you're taken care of and have your ducks in a row, so that if you have an accident, you're covered, and you've got the stuff to take some reports, take some notes on the side or some pictures. But what about if you're on the freeway, one of the first things, make sure everybody's okay.
Right.
Stay safe.
Safety is rule one. Yeah. It's if you're in rush hour traffic, you're on the freeway, and it's not a major collision, try to find a way to get out of traffic with your vehicles, making sure both parties who are in the collision, get off safely, make sure that everybody is not injured. Severely. Sometimes things sneak up the day or two after whiplash or whatever. But as long as you don't need to call an ambulance, just safety is the first consideration with everything.
Well, and there's that part of safety, but then we've heard of scams before where two people go and one person stops, causes the next person to rear end, a little insurance scam.
Yep.
Or maybe you're in a bad part of town. Maybe it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know, you're driving through the hood, whatever that description in your brain is. And, let's just say it's a dark road, and out of the blue, someone rear-ends you. It doesn't make sense. Well, maybe you just don't need to pull over. Maybe you need to drive the next mile to the Circle K.
Sure.
And get to a well-lit, because you got to think about not just your injury or being on the side of the road and maybe getting hit by another car, but your personal safety. Are you being scammed possibly?
Exactly. And in light of that also, at the same time, in that situation, I would call the police. And then don't have any contact with the person that you got in the collision with, other than, hey, I've called the police, they're on their way, let's hang tight until they show up.
Right. And so that's if you're in a bad situation. If you're in a good, I don't know if there is a good situation when having an accident, but we were talking about this road. You don't want to get in a fight and start debating whose fault it is on the side of the road, because that's number one. It's not going to get settled there. Right. Even if you're right, I guarantee the other person thinks they're right. And
it's all perception. It's like, well, what I thought I saw happen, when I was driving when we got in the wreck, and the person who I collided with or collided with me, their perception is different at the same time. And you hear the stories of the road rage, and it's a difficult situation to begin with right off the bat. High stress. You don't want to get into a shouting match or a debate over whose fault it was. Leave that to the police officer when he comes out to take the report, gather the information from both sides, and then make the judgment call from there with the insurance.
Well, so. It's the insurance companies, even the police, they can't determine who's at fault. That's for the court to do. They don't get to be judge and jury, but their story is gonna have an indication.
It will, yeah. They're the impartial third party that comes in. They gather information, and then that's used by the insurance companies to determine who's legitimately at fault.
And they do this. Insurance companies do this hundreds of thousands of times a week, probably, or a month.
Oh yeah.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered that. We've covered the safety. Well, I'll tell you, I'll be damned. I laugh now, but I'm driving to work. I go down the 51 and I exit Thomas yesterday morning, 7:30, and I'm thinking, okay, I know Dave's not going to be in tomorrow. Kevin's coming in. What are we going to talk about? So I'm talking about thinking, okay, body shop. What do we do? We get in an accident. Smack! I hit the car in front of me. I said,
he came in a good mood yesterday.
Yeah.
I was so mad. But so I'm the example. I can laugh now. It was no big deal. Nobody was hurt, although,
Other than your pride a little bit, maybe?
It was my fault. I mean, there's no doubt about that. She stopped, thought traffic was going to go. I looked up, saw her moving. I let my foot off the gas.
Yep.
I let my foot off the brake and just coasted and touched her.
Yep.
I mean, I had a brand new tee from my favorite Lucy's joint down here on 16th and Bethany, and I didn't spill any of it, so I know I didn't hit her that hard. But what drove me crazy, she didn't want to move out of the intersection. I'm like, there's people behind us. Come on, they're honking, and we move, and I can't find. I had my insurance card on my smartphone, on my iPhone. I had a picture of it, so that was good. I think that's a good way to store your documents.
Yep.
Take a picture of registration. Take maybe a picture of your driver's license. Take a picture of your insurance card. And what I was able to do with her yesterday was just text it to her. We had to trade information, and I said, well, instead of writing all this down, what's your cell phone number? I'll just text it to you. So that worked out well for us to have that. Now, I didn't have the registration. I had an expired one.
Yeah.
And, of course, now we can talk about the police. Should we always call the police? I say no.
If it's very minor, I would agree with you. There's times where I've seen it, though, where people have good intentions, but it's one of those things, the perception thing, where it's like, I thought this, but the other person thinks this, and to have that documentation by the time, or so when you get into the actual shop to get it repaired, and for insurance clarification, so the adjusters on both sides of the insurance companies have good information and not conflicting stories. If it's more than just a minor thing, I would say my rule of thumb, what I recommend to my customers is get the police involved.
Yeah. See, and yesterday I was a little frustrated, and I don't tend to get my cage rattled like most people might, or like a few might. And so I was like, really, call the police? It didn't even break a lens. In that case, I would call that extremely minor. I guess you have to make that split-second judgment call. Am I dealing with some guy that looks like a degenerate? I don't think I do.
Right. No, no, you don't.
I had my ID. I had a business card. My business card has my picture on it. So I was a little frustrated, but then the police got there. Of course, they didn't take a report. I felt like it just wasted a little bit of time. But if you have broken glass and you have fluid leaking, get that. Always, we talked about sometimes. Maybe let's just say that car had $200 damage. I just want to pay for it myself. I don't want to involve my insurance company. That's okay sometimes, but I would still always suggest always get the insurance information when you're no matter what. Get the insurance. Maybe I told the lady, I'll just pay the $200 to have it buffed or whatever. That's fine. Get the insurance information and you have it just in case I go haywire and change my mind. So
yeah, or if you get into the repair and it's more costly.
Well, let's help Brian from Phoenix. Brian's got a 2005, looks like a Dodge 250 pickup. What can we help you with, Brian?
I'm struggling with this truck. It's in really good condition. I don't want to get rid of it, but it cuts out it takes about 20 minutes of highway driving and about 2,000 RPM, and it will cut out, and it'll actually ding my message center, and a light will flash on there, and it looks like the tow haul light, and it won't leave any message. So I've had it at Dodge a couple times, and I've had it at Southwest Diesel, and they cannot get it to replicate this problem, and it has kind of quit doing it now in the winter months, and it just did it yesterday on my way home. And So I was told by a friend to call in and see what you guys can do. So
put us to the test, huh? When this thing shuts off, does it like slowly drag out like it's starving and choking out, or is it just like a light switch? Boom, it's dead.
It's a instantaneous, quick little shutter. And it actually, at one point, I thought maybe it was the transmission slipping because I was looking at my RPM gauge when it did it, and it kind of jumped up and it went up and came right back down, and it was never actually shut off. The Dodge dealership informed me that might be what has to happen in order to fix it, and I wasn't too happy with that answer.
So does the engine shut off, or it just loses the ability to power and go?
It just loses its power, and it's just for a split second. And it's never actually quit on me. And like I said, I'm afraid to leave town with it. I've got a trailer, and I'm just afraid to take it anywhere.
Well, intermittent problems, I think it's a case that it's not that they can't fix it or they can't figure it out. It's that it's not happening to them while it's there, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Well, that's the most challenging thing in the shop, and Tim's looking at me with his face. We have a Chevy Duramax truck in our shop now. We can't get it to it won't do it.
It's doing a similar thing too also.
Yeah, it's just like literally every fourth week, out of the blue, for no reason, it just shuts off on the guy. So, that's a difficult one. If it was more frequent, I might refer you to a place like Automotive Diagnostic Specialties in Chandler where they have a dyno where they can actually drive it on the dyno. Some of the things I'm thinking about, though, if it just shuts off instantaneously, that would be electric, not starving for fuel or anything like that. So maybe as you're driving, you could play with that tow haul switch a little bit. Maybe you can get it to act up, maybe wiggle the shifter. I'm not going from reverse to neutral or anything like that while you're driving or drive. Wiggle the key. Ignition switches have funny problems. That might be something that would help you. So hopefully that helps. And if when you get to the problem, we'd like to hear the answer. Maybe you can go to bumpertobumperradio.com and send us an email. It's always nice to hear about the weird things and what fixes them. So, Brian, thanks for the call. We're going to go with David on a 2005 Escalade. David, you're on Bumper to Bumper Radio. What can we help you with?
Hey, guys. Thanks very much. I damaged my taillight quite some time ago and used the standard shade tree mechanic method of holding it on until I got it fixed, namely duct tape. Now,
did you at least use red duct tape?
No, actually it was white and gray.
Okay,
there we go.
I was looking for black to match the paint, but I couldn't find it. Anyway, it's replaced, but I have a lot of duct tape residue on the paint. How do I get that off safely without damaging the paint?
There's a couple of things that you can do with that. There's at an auto body supply store, they have something that's called Acrosol. And it's kind of like a goof off, but it's made for to be used on painted panels. And it doesn't hurt the paint, but it takes up all that residue. It'll take it off the plastic, and if there's any on the actual body panels themselves. That's probably the safest method. Some people will use just straight lacquer thinner. I don't usually recommend that because that, if you're not careful, that can damage some stuff.
It could eat up the clear coat, or it takes the wax off too.
It'll take the wax off, and on some plastic surfaces, it'll just cause it to basically melt. It just depends on what you're using it on. So
goof off was my original thought. Mm-hmm. But what about? I've used just WD-40. What do you think about that?
I keep away from WD-40 in the shop because that's a silicone-based thing, and we're
petroleum-based.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'll ruin rubber. Yeah.
Yeah, and when in our environment down at the shop, that stuff gets in the air, and it'll actually find its way into my paint booth. It atomizes and it just travels everywhere. So anything that's petroleum or silicone based stays out of my shop because it's a refinish. Yeah, exactly. It's a refinishing environment, so we can't use that stuff. So for us at the shop, we use Acrosol, and you can find that at auto body supply stores and paint supply stores.
I think Napa has even
they'll have a version of that
stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So any 3M products. Well, that's a good question. And so when people are replacing, like you get that one-off taillight. Mm-hmm. There's aftermarket, and then there's brand new.
Yep.
Is there a difference on a taillight or a headlight, for example?
Sometimes the way it actually fits will be a little bit different. And sometimes the way the actual colors look and the lenses will look a little bit different. But it's one of those cost to benefit type of things. If you're paying out of your pocket, As long as it's a good fitting product, you should be all right going aftermarket.
Right. Well, and I see, I like original equipment parts, and we can talk about that a little more later, but it's okay sometimes to use an aftermarket. Maybe it's better to use an original equipment. The one I see when people should do two lenses, like you see the car that just got out of the body shop, and one lens is brand new and the other one's nice and yellow.
Yep.
Do you see cycles? Is there anything to the snowbirds coming to town, the snowbirds leaving town, the monsoons? What makes your business cycle?
There is a big correlation to how busy my shop is right around those times when the winter visitors are here. For me, it's what I've noticed is the university, the schools, and the snowbirds coming back to town. There's just a lot more congestion on the roads.
It's not any one it's not like, the darn snowbirds or those students. It's just
there's
more congestion, more traffic.
Yeah, you notice it on your drive into work in the mornings during the summer. For me, I just the traffic's just way lighter.
Right. Well, there's what I'd say. I'm a race fan. It's those people. I got my saying about those people that are going to get in a wreck and the ones that have or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think that's a Darrell Waltrip. Those who have hit the wall and those who haven't hit it yet.
Yeah.
But same thing with an accident. Either you've been in an automobile accident or you're going to have one.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to know the guy that you need to call. And Kevin's that guy. So in your phone right now, you should program I-17 collision. If you're anywhere west of 16th Street, west of Central, it doesn't really matter because body shop is a destination. It's not a quick work. So if it's 5 miles away or 15 miles away, it's still going to be a week. So who cares?
That's right.
I-17 collision, I-17 Peoria is the people you want to know. So we've got lots of calls here, and first we are going to help Charlene with her 2010 Toyota Sienna. Charlene, thanks for being patient, and what can we help you with?
Hi. I have a power steering belt that when I turn the wheel, it squeals, and when I took it in for an oil change, I asked them about it, and they said that the belt is glazed and that I should change it. And I just wondered if it's really necessary to change it.
Well, how many miles are in your 2010 Sienna?
About 34,000.
About 34,000. Well, I would say that, yes, it is necessary to change it. And I say that first, most importantly, because you have a symptom that goes along with it. You had a problem, and they identified it as the belt squeaking. So, yes, it's not an example of I had nothing wrong with my car, and now I really don't know why they want to put the belt on. My gut feeling is 34,000.
That's 34 is about our average time on a belt.
Well, I was going to say it seems a little bit early, actually. I have a Toyota truck 2010 with 37,000, and I don't have any squeal.
30 to 40,000 is that range where they start to, you can't see anymore. The belts are made differently now. In the rubber, we used to look for cracks. And now we have a tool at the shop that measures the depth of the grooves of the serpentine belt.
Right, because that material actually starts to shred off. It kind of wears out like a tire now. Or like Tim said before, we'd be looking at the belt and looking for cracks. Well, they don't crack anymore; they just wear out. So, for the average person, you may or may not be able to see that the belt's bad. And I wouldn't worry about it necessarily on your car as far as the other components. There's a belt system there. There's a tensioner and there's idlers. At 37,000 miles, I'm sure there's nothing wrong with any of those components. But as your car gets up over 100,000 miles, we start looking at replacing those as well because they fail. So, Charlene, I think it'd be just fine. Just go get the belt replaced. We are going to go next with Melody and Surprise with a 2006 Chrysler. Melody, what can we help you with today?
Well, I've got 170,000 miles on my car, and I drive it for a living, so I'm really good about maintenance and taking care of it. I have a mechanic who I trust implicitly.
Good.
And last time he was doing just some regular stuff and checking things out for me. He said my transmission fluid was starting to smell a little burnt, so I need to go have a transmission flush. He told me to make sure that, specifically for my model, that they changed the filter as well. And I've been to several shops, and none of them changed their filter. They all want to charge me an hour to an hour and a half of labor in addition to the flush, which is around $200, to change that filter. And what I want to know is, who's right? Does the filter really need changed or not?
Well, if Dave was here, he would have a strong opinion, and I'll tell you the answer is kind of like Coke or Pepsi. You should change the filter, and you should flush it. And you don't necessarily need to do both of those at the same time or together. The reason you want to change the filter is because you need to see if there's any debris or any any material or anything in that filter. That's going to be a sign of what's happening inside the transmission if there's a problem. That filter can also just get plugged up with the very fine clutch material and the normal wear and tear over time, especially with the mileage you have. That filter can plug up and cause the transmission to starve for fluid. So your friend is right that told you that. You should change the filter. And I think maybe you're going to find the industry went that route, I think, for convenience. I don't know if it was initiated by the Jiffy Lubes and the Quick Lubes of the world because they couldn't do transmission services before, and now they can, kinda. So, and the other reason that we started flushing is that when you do the pan-off service, let's just say your car probably holds 15 quarts of fluid. When you remove the transmission pan and change just the filter, you're only changing, let's say, maybe 3 to 5 quarts of that fluid. So my example is like a glass of chocolate milk. You have this nice rich glass of chocolate milk, and you drink it all the way down to a third maybe, and then go pour fresh milk in and stir it all up again. You probably have another glass of chocolate milk. You didn't get all the fluid out, all the old stuff. So I think maybe alternating every other and doing it about 20 or 30,000 miles, depending on if you're driving for work. There's a lot of shifting, a lot of stuff happening there. Or occasionally you could do both of them together. And then the other thing on that car, I would make sure you're using the proper fluid. Chrysler is going to call out a specific fluid for you. So that's important. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Maybe one is better. And next up is Lee on his 2010 Nissan Titan. Lee, what can we help you with?
Paul, can you hear me?
I can. What can we help you with?
Okay. I have a 2010 Titan. I get like 16.8 to the gallon. I have a 5-point whatever it is engine that they have in this thing. It runs okay. But I read in the paper a couple of years ago or a year ago maybe in January about this lady that had some kind of performance, an additive, not a liquid, but something she did to the engine that got her up to 50% more mileage. And I hope you know what I'm talking about. And if not that particular lady, she started a company. If not that particular lady, somebody else. Or is there a chip that I can put in the truck that would make it more economical?
There may or but there may not be. I don't know which lady you're talking about. So if you find that, if you can research that and let us know, send us an email, that would be great. There's no magic bullet. To get these manufacturers spend millions and millions of dollars on R&D every year to try and get good gas mileage. And if there was a 98-cent or $20 piece they could put on the car to make it double, they would certainly do it because they would sell a heck of a lot more cars. So I doubt that there is anything. The things that you can do to keep and maintain your mileage are things like tire pressure. Right, Tim? I mean, tire pressure.
Just changing your oil.
Keeping the oil maintained, air filter.
And your driving habits, too. That's a big thing.
Big time.
The way you drive. If you're on the gas, on the brake, you're trying to hit the light, you're trying to miss the, that kind of stuff.
Hurry up and wait. Well, you know, and if you change your driving habits, you might not have to go see Kevin.
Don't change your driving habits.
Yeah, right. Well, good question, but I'm just not a big believer in a lot of the additives and that type of stuff. So, Scott and Gilbert, we are going to help you with your 2003 Suzuki. I saw a Suzuki Akashi the other day, and I thought that's a pretty cool car. What can we help you with, Scott?
Yeah.
Go ahead. What can we help you with?
Well, I've got a 2003 Suzuki Ariel, like you were saying, and I do most of my own maintenance, and I took my car in and I actually asked, hey, what are the procedures on changing the transmission fluid and changing the filter? And when the last caller called in, that's what made me think of this. But they said there actually is no filter on your car, and I just thought, that seems so bizarre. There's got to be a transmission filter on every car, right? Or
well,
no?
Yes and no. And what they may mean is that there's not a serviceable filter on your car. And it may just have a metal screen too. They're just like your window on your house, the screen, although it's real metal or some kind of reinforced material. But, for example, Hondas forever, Honda Accord, Civic, whatever, they're just a drain and fill service. There is a filter, but the only way to change that filter is you're actually splitting the transmission case apart. It's not designed to be part of regular maintenance. So
yeah, not economical.
not
even
at all.
Close.
It's not even a thing to consider. So they very well may be right, and so maybe that's the question: is this a permanent filter, or when you say there's not one, is it just not one that needs to be serviced? And then same thing, you're going to typically just drain and fill that fluid. And again, a lot of these fluids are very vehicle specific, so you just want to make sure you're using the right fluid. So thanks for the call. Jim and Gilbert on a 2001 Ford Taurus. Jim, what can we help you with?
Hi, thanks for taking the call. I drove my Ford to work one day and I hadn't had any problems. Later at the end of the day, I drove it over to the supermarket, came back out, and it wouldn't start up. I left it there overnight, and came back the next day, and I was prepared to tow it, and it started right up and surprised me. I drove it home, and then the next day, again, it wouldn't start up, and I haven't been able to get it to start. It cranks strong and everything. One little thing that I read on the internet, I don't know if it's valid or not. I tried. I had suspicions on a fuel pump, so I took off my gas cap and had somebody turn it on and off, and supposedly you can hear a slight hum sometimes if you listen to the gas cap for a couple of seconds, and I didn't hear anything. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we need, it's in one sense, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it's good that it died and that it won't start now, because that makes it a lot easier. Typically, when you turn the key on initial startup, that first, don't crank it, just turn the key on, you are going to get like a 3-second buzz. And if you're not hearing that, that's maybe an indication. I wouldn't take that to the bank, but I would provide that information to the shop that you go to. Before, I mean, I certainly wouldn't hang my hat on that and then go put a $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 fuel pump in the car, whatever it costs. You definitely want to have it checked first, but that's a good indicator. And then that doesn't mean it's the fuel pump. It could be a relay. The computer is what sends the signal to the relay to activate the fuel pump, so it could be that. And we have Bernadette up first from Scottsdale on a Nissan Maxima. Bernadette, go ahead.
Hi there. I really just wanted your opinion and see if I've taken my car in a few times because the check engine light keeps coming on. And the first time they fixed a leak in a vacuum hose, and then it came on again. We changed an O2 sensor, and it came on again, and I just took it in, and they changed the MAF sensor.
Okay. And then the light's on again, and I'm assuming all for the same code or the same type of problem?
Yes, it was a loose ground they finally found in the MAF sensor.
Okay, and that's what finally fixed it?
Yes, as far as I know, it hasn't come back on again.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. So your question is?
Well, does it sound normal to have to chase it around? I mean, is that just one of those things?
Well, it is, and it is normal. It's all of those. It's abnormal. The benefit of hindsight, 2020 hindsight, it's very easy for me to form an opinion now after somebody else has struggled. So it happens. Sometimes it's a multi-step repair. If they fixed a vacuum leak, it's because you had a vacuum leak. And I think sometimes what shops do, and we're guilty of it too, and when I say guilty, not in a bad way, we have a misfire, for example, and we go and we find this problem, and we see where the spark plug wire is arcing. Well, that's got to be it. We put the blinders on, so to speak, and we don't go far enough. You know what I mean? And then so we have to come back and fix the car again, maybe do another repair. Sounds like in that case the ground wire could have been the problem all along, and now I think maybe you're asking, did I really need all that work? Well, I don't know. I really don't know. That's something that maybe you go back and ask the shop. Is there something that you did that maybe I shouldn't be paying for? I'm glad they fixed it for you. But unless I know all the details, I certainly don't want to come second guess what somebody else has done because I don't know all the details. But it's a good question. I'm glad you stuck with them. I'm glad the car's fixed. if you feel like it's worth it, it's certainly worth having a very nice conversation, not on a Monday morning or a Friday morning when they're busy, and just go talk to the manager and see if there's something. Have him explain. That's what you should do, is always ask questions and understand. Don't feel like you're being a pest. That's their job, to help you. You've paid them and they need to help you. So thanks again for the call. And John in Mesa on a 2002 Accord. What can we help you with today, John?
I got my Accord. When I have the air conditioning on, I get to a stop sign or light, the thing just vibrates. The steering wheel vibrates bad. So I took it to the Honda dealer, and they tested it against another one. They said, yeah, they do that. That's normal. So I went to my mechanic, and he said he feels it's motor mounts. He said the two side ones are usually what does it, but I want to know what you think.
Well, that's what I was originally going to say, was motor mount or engine mount. And back when I was starting to learn early 80s, 90s, the advent of the front-wheel drive car, the Hondas were really popular. People would come in, and that's back when we did tune-ups. You put in spark plugs, you set the timing, and you had to mechanically do all that tune-up work. People would come in and say, gee, I need a tune-up. No, you don't need a tune-up. The car runs fine. No, it runs rough. No, that's not the engine running rough. The car runs great. Put it in drive, it has a vibration. So very likely it's motor mounts.
And it's not like when the dealer told you it's normal. That's not nothing. No vibration's normal. Maybe it's normal that's happening when the mounts are worn out.
Right.
Maybe they didn't finish for you.
Yeah, it's normal when the mounts are bad, but it's definitely not something you want to let go. What we find, no, the engine's not going to fall out on the ground or anything like that. You're not going to have issues like that. But in extreme cases, you'll get where they break and the engine lifts up. Every time you accelerate, that engine is going to want to twist out of the car. And literally, it's not going to come out of the car. But it causes other vibrations.
Can damage some other components, wiring and stuff like that.
Yeah, we've seen them pull on wiring harnesses, pull on air boots. They, and then it just makes the car a rattle trap sometimes. So it's very likely the mounts. The other thing, and this is a topic too, Kevin, that we were talking about, and we have an email. It was Tanya wrote in saying, my car was wrecked and they want to use some used parts. My husband says no way. What should I do? Now, we're not talking used parts necessarily here on the motor mount thing, but that leads more into the aftermarket comment that I'm going to make. But Kevin, what do you think about using used parts in the body shop arena?
With used parts, as long as they come from a source that is a good salvage yard, a good recycling yard. If they come in clean, where I don't have to do a whole bunch of work to them to take a bad part and make it good, as long as it comes in clean, I prefer to use that over aftermarket parts, because it came off of a Toyota fender. It's off of another vehicle that was made by Toyota. The sheet metal's the same gauge. The corrosion protection is going to be the same, and it's going to fit properly without any weird gaps or anything.
Well, right. And what I was going to say, if I would have wrecked my truck yesterday, actually wrecked it, I would prefer a used Toyota 2010 out of a salvage yard fender than I would a brand new aftermarket.
Yep.
And the point I'm making here, though, is that used parts are okay in those cases. In the mechanical world, we're always, or most of the time, using mechanical parts, except for one time, motor mounts.
Factory only.
Yeah, factory only, original motor mounts, and that's it. Body shop stuff.